we ready? Okay. I will call to order the meeting of the Design Review Board today, August 10th, 2023. Would ask if staff can confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act requirement notice has been properly provided.
I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Okay, moving on to 1.3 and roll call.
I'll call roll. Board Member Manley.
Present.
Board Member Martins.
Present.
Board Member Romy. Board Member Noonan.
Present.
Chair Kitchen.
Present.
Okay, we have 4 members in attendance, and that constitutes a quorum. We provided advance notice of today's meeting, so we can move ahead with today's agenda.
Okay, moving on to item number 2.1, approval of the minutes of the July 13th regular meeting. Does anyone have any comments or concerns? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I will make the motion to approve.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to new business, item 3.1, application CC 23-9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a public hearing item on application number CC 23-9 that's been filed by John Nelson on behalf of the Salina Regional Health Center. And the request before you is for consideration of a certificate of compatibility to allow the demolition of a 3-story commercial building on the Salina Regional Health Center campus. And this building is more commonly known as the Braddock Building, and it's located on the south side of West South Street between Santa Fe and South 8th Street. And with our updated aerial photography, you might make note of the fact that in 2022 you considered a request for approval of demolition of a house that was located right here, and with our updated aerial photos it shows that that is been removed and is no longer there, and the subject of today's application is this building next to it here. The other thing was that when the South 8th Street Historic District was formed, it went back a certain distance back from 8th Street up and down the block, and the Historic District boundary fell right here between these two buildings. So this is located within the Business Improvement District, but is not located within the South 8th Street Historic District. And we provided you with a little bit of background on this building. Because the 7th Street used to go through and was closed and vacated, our records show that at one point this building had an address of 400 South 7th Street, but when 7th Street disappeared, it was kind of just absorbed into the 400 South Santa Fe address. And so our records indicate that the building was named for Florence Braddock, who was the original superintendent of the Asbury School of Nursing. That this building is 3 stories, was constructed during the 1960s. It was the home of the Asbury School of Nursing, as well as nurses' dormitory. In 2010, it took on new life as a temporary home for the KU School of Medicine, and that operation moved over to a building on 138 South Santa Fe in 2018. And so it's our understanding, which we can confirm today, that the building, the Braddock building, has been unused. Hasn't had a primary user since the medical school vacated the premises. And so before you is an application for approval of a demolition permit to allow the demolition and removal of this building. The application states that the structure is no longer habitable and is in need of demolition. We don't have any specific plans for replacement construction or reuse of the demolition site other than to restore it back to green space. Because we are located within the Business Improvement District, a certificate of compatibility is required before staff can administratively issue a demolition permit for the demolition and removal of this structure. We have scheduled today's for a hearing to consider the request, and as we noted, the property next door to the west was approved for removal in 2022. So our guidelines state that demolition should only be considered if a building does not contribute to the historical or architectural character of the downtown district, or if it detracts from and does not have the potential to contribute to the importance of the district, or if we're removing a building because the resulting redevelopment would result in a more positive visual effect on the district. So an example of that might be the removal of the old Phoenix Hotel and the replacement by the field house and the insurance office that's there. That would be an example of a removal that resulted in reconstruction or new construction that would result in a more positive visual effect on the district. That is not the case here because there is no plan for new construction, but it is based on its location and its utilitarian design. It's difficult to say that the Braddock building is significant in terms of the overall historical or architectural character of downtown. I did want to note that this is not a case of a dangerous structure or a structure where the city's building official has determined or declared that this is an unsafe or dangerous structure. Back when the KU School of Medicine was in the building, there were some reports of maintenance issues with the roof and internal pipes, but we would request that Mr. Nelson provide additional detail about the existing conditions or structural deterioration that make it uninhabitable and why rehabilitation and repair of this building is not an alternative to demolition. Again, we believe that this is not it's on a fringe location and it's not a significant contributor to the fabric of downtown Salina. The applicant's view is that it's obsolete and no longer fits with a modern medical campus. So we've outlined 3 possible findings. The first finding is just based on obtaining some additional information from the applicant demonstrating that rehabilitation or repair or reuse is not feasible in this case. And then we've identified alternatives on page 4 of your report, which would be to approve this request. Second option would be to approve the request subject to any conditions approved by a majority of the board. You could postpone consideration to a future meeting date if you think you need additional information concerning the Salina Regional Health Center's proposal, or you could deny the application if you can make findings that would support denial of the proposed project. So our recommendation is that if the applicant is able to provide additional information for you as a decision maker about the deteriorated condition of the structure and the inability of the hospital to repair and rehabilitate it for reuse, then we would recommend alternative 2, that you authorize the demolition of the building subject to 2 conditions that we have at the bottom of page 4. So with that, staff would be open to any questions, or we would look forward to hearing from Mr. Nelson.
Do you have questions? Guess I'll wait for my questions. Okay, if we want to hear from the applicant, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is John Nelson. I'm the Director of Facilities for Salina Regional Health Center. I will say that the building fortunately is not decayed to the point where it's being forced to be tore down. There are significant infrastructure issues. Electrical, there's been cases where items have been plugged in to the walls where the structure building is concrete block, and so it's internal to the concrete block. Items have been plugged into the walls. They pull them out. The whole box comes out of the wall because it's rusted out. Same with the plumbing. It's cast iron, and there's just multiple areas where we've had to close down areas because of the plumbing is interior to a concrete block wall or something of that nature, and it's just doesn't seem appropriate to correct at this time. The use of the building is with it being limited with from floor to deck space of any other use than office, doesn't really make it conducive to that. And then the original design, with it being more of a dormitory design with showers internal and bathrooms, and a lot of the block walls in there being structural, to take those out and make it, more usable space, just doesn't seem feasible or cost effective. And the water intrusion from the outside brick, from the roof has been repaired along the way, and so that's minimized. But the windows itself, they're a problem. It's just a lot of issues with the building that to try to go in and repair and make it habitable it just seems doesn't cost effective right now, and there's no planned use for that space that fits in with the plan. If we were going to make a function, a use for a building, the location isn't really a good location, even just from the setback from the street. If we were to build something now, I think it wouldn't be desirable, even from a city standpoint, to have it so close to the street. And the HVAC is another issue. Just it's hard to control the humidity in the building. Causes mold issues once in a while, and so it's mitigating that. So there's just a lot of different aspects that are cumulative to make it not desirable to try to keep it. So I'll answer any other questions.
So what is the planned use for the space if approved?
To put it to green space and just have an empty space at this time. There's no plan for any building or anything to go back in there right now.
Just curiosity-wise, long-range plans. I know there's nothing planned at the moment, and this is probably a question that maybe you can't answer, but like long-term planning that thinks that the hospital might expand in that area sometime or anything, or?
If the hospital were to expand, it would be on an actual existing structure, and then this would just be a case where it would be, a buffer, more of a buffer between the street and whatever would be built, and then go through the approval process that way of, landscaping and all that. So, I just don't see how that the footprint of the building, there would be anything built back there. I think it would be more of a design and buffering more than anything else.
Yeah, so we have the site plan up there that just shows how this fits within there. The other aspect of that, and some of the things have been removed, some not, but anytime you close and vacate a street, sometimes you have remnant utilities that are still there, and there still may be some buried utilities in vacated 7th Street that might prevent covering that or bridging that with a building. And so it might be difficult to do any kind of addition that would extend that far west.
Thank you.
Yep.
I guess this is a question more for staff, and it's kind of going back to a question that I raised, I think the last time the hospital was in front of us, about how we protect or reuse spaces within our community from deteriorating to a point that the only choice is to tear down. This reading through this application kind of brought some of those questions back to me as well, and not necessarily that this building is,
We've had some previous discussion about the concept of demolition by neglect, and we do have some material that we can bring back for your discussion. But even communities that have a demolition by neglect ordinance has primarily focused those on things that are historic landmarks or specifically designated significant historic structures, such as if you had a contributing structure on South Santa Fe, part of a historic district, you might want to have the opportunity to intervene before that became so deteriorated that the only choice was demolition. But in this particular case, there's nothing based on age it would qualify, but there's nothing about the Braddock building in and of itself, architecturally or historically, other than the name association with Florence Braddock, that would put it in a historic preservation category. So even if we had some sort of demolition by neglect ordinance, we would focus on the items or properties that are particularly historically significant to
Okay.
protect those, but not every older or outmoded building.
Okay, thank you.
And listening to Mr. Nelson's comments, a lot of what he is talking about is not negligence or ignoring maintenance by the hospital, but you have a building that has solid concrete walls that was originally built as a dormitory for nurses, and it's really difficult to reconfigure and reuse space when you've got internal load-bearing walls and you've got things designed for a dormitory. So I think what he's saying is that the building is not ready structurally to fall down, but internally there are so many things that are non-functional that it's not really conducive to an adaptive reuse.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any citizens that on Zoom?
We do not have anyone from the public online for comment.
Okay,
We did send mail notice out to neighboring property owners, but as for myself, I did not receive any calls or comments from neighboring property owners in regard to this request, but we did provide notice to neighbors.
okay. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts? No? Okay, then I'll close the public comment portion and ask if there's a motion for this application.
I'll make the motion to approve the, under option 1, certificate of compatibility for the demolition of the Braddock building, subject to the 3 conditions found in the packet, and also that the green space be maintained.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve option 1 for application CC 23-9. Any other discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any administrative items on the agenda unless staff has something.
We don't have anything for you, just to bring up a couple things. One, under other business, that we will meet on the 24th of August, the second meeting of the month, as we have an application filed. And then whether we have business or not, we will have, in anticipation and hope that we may get some other members appointed at the end of August. September is always the time when we have our annual business meeting, election of officers, orientation and training. So we will have a meeting in September, hopefully to welcome and orient new members. And so we'll give you the date on that. But we will meet on the 24th of August because we do have a case filed for that date.
Okay. So I'm going to move to item number 4, unfinished or other business. Does anyone have any unfinished or other business?
Chair, I would like to bring something up for the board's consideration. So, question regarding the approval process or the process of how this board operates, see if there's any opportunities for streamlining the process. It's been on the back of my mind for some time. We've got to commend staff and applicants for the thorough applications. It makes our life very simple. But that being said, I cannot recall very many applications that we haven't deviated from staff recommendation. If we have, it's just very, very minor stuff. And so really came up last meeting, I think it was in July, when Greg Bankston with Clark Mize Linville came in here. I think there was 10 of us plus him, had an application process. Staff spent some time on it. Obviously, he spent some time on it, and all he wanted to do was paint his building. Like, really? Are we going to spend this much time? And time is money, sitting here on if he wanted to just paint his building. So that was approved. So other similar instances in the past. So I was bringing it up to this board to see if that's the best use of everyone's time when something like that could have been approved. Some process before it comes to this commission, because it's probably been weeks since Mr. Nelson submitted this application, and this may not be a good example of that. This would probably come to the commission, but is there a better way to do it?
Well, and it's, you have the hindsight and you have the short sight. This body has existed since around 1986. From 1986 to 2000, it was more or less operated and managed by Salina Downtown, Inc. There was much dissatisfaction with how Salina Downtown, Inc. was operating and managing the board. So it was turned over to the city planning staff to manage and operate in the same way that we operate the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Heritage Commission, and this board. And so it's on par with those. And then as to the painting question, there were 3 cases that I'm aware of where this board denied approval of a request to paint buildings downtown on Santa Fe, one of which was upheld by the City Commission on appeal, and then as a result of that, in 2016, the entire ordinance for this board was rewritten and new timeframes installed, and I think what we need to do is share with you the matrix of the things that were decided that staff can improve. There is a wide range of things that staff can improve administratively that you don't see, that don't come to you, and then there's a range of ones, and one that in 2016 that was unanimously decided, including the City Commission, was the exterior painting of buildings downtown. So that was something that was not put in the administrative list, and there was no one that I'm aware of on either this board or the City Commission that wanted that to be an administrative item. So that's that's a little history on that. Some of our time frames were shortened quite a bit, and I can say that we understand that sensitivity. One of the reasons this board meets, for instance, the Board of Zoning Appeals meets once a month. This board meets twice a month, and this board has the shortest public notice period of any board that we have. So the turnaround time for a design review board application is much shorter than any other applications that we receive. So items that go to the other boards we have, the lead time is anywhere from 30 to 40 days. In this board's case, it's anywhere from 10 to 14 days. And so the staff is under a lot more time pressure to timely respond to and get before this board applications for downtown projects than we are for any of the boards that we help to administer. So, I mean, I hope that gives you just a little bit from our perspective. But if someone was doing something that required Planning Commission or Board of Zoning Appeals hearing, the lead time between their application, and some of that is prescribed by state law, but state law requires 20 days advanced notice for neighbors prior to the Board of Zoning Appeals or Planning Commission taking action. There is no statutory requirement for this board, so our local requirement is 7 days. So we have a much more compressed time frame for applications and taking action here than we do for any other board. So that's how we see it from our perspective. But the problem that were identified when staff took over management of this board were secret meetings, no records of meetings, no written summary of what happened at meetings, that type of thing. And so we were instructed to take this board and make it operate the same way that our other boards and commissions operate, which means meeting in this room, taking minutes, having written records, providing notice of the meetings, all those types of things. So that it may seem like overkill in some cases, but I can assure you that the time frame is more compressed than our other boards. And then the other thing that we probably need to do a better job of sharing is all the things we have, what we call a matrix, and that matrix is 2 pages long, and the left column is major projects that require board approval and minor projects that don't require board approval. And so we err, if it's a gray area, we err on bringing it here, and if it's not, then we would just do something and approve it administratively.
Do you feel, from a staff point of view, that the matrix is over-constricting on staff, or do you feel like it has a decent balance?
Well, I mean, it was thought out and reviewed by everyone, but there's not to be said that it can't be pulled out and re-looked at. We're not, I guess we look at this year, this is CC 23-9, I think in 2021, maybe it was, we had 24 cases that came before this board, but a lot of them were pretty major, and some of them involved different things, whether it was a relocation of the Campbell Plaza stage or things like that. So the matrix is designed to allow us to approve minor changes, minor projects, and things that are facade changes. The other thing that I'm not sure is you can pretty much do what you want to do if it's on the back side of your building or out of view. Those are things that get approved administratively by staff. The only things that we bring to this board are things that affect the front facade of buildings that face Santa Fe, and items that involve either new construction or demolition. So those, if you look at the cases that come to this board, almost all of them fall within that category. They're either something that's a change to a facade that faces Santa Fe, or it's somebody proposing new construction or addition, or they're proposing demolition of some existing structure.
Well, and the other comment that I would have for Mr. Manley, after thinking about just the process and different things, I will say having a board and not a lot of it relying on staff. I think our staff does a beautiful job staying neutral, but through my work in different municipalities, I've experienced firsthand staff kind of using arbitrary ideas of they just don't like it, and then it's really hard because you don't have a matrix or don't have something that's on the applicant side of things to feel like you can get a design approved, and having a board and the staff kind of becomes this wall you can't get through to even get to the board. And so I do like our process on some levels that the staff provides a summary and then it's really up to local community members to make the decision too. So that was the only thing I was going to add to the discussion about just thinking it from the applicant side. While it's maybe more work, it's also more of a neutral space they're coming to.
What you won't see us doing is meeting with an applicant and saying, we think this is a really bad idea, so we're not going to take it to the board.
Right, I've experienced that firsthand.
That's not something that we do or would do, and so our job is to get it put together and put before you, because you're the ones that make decisions, not staff, and we don't want to be. We'll make minor administrative decisions that aren't going to impact neighbors, and we'll do that efficiently. But I think, that the best thing that we could do, and that's kind of why we have the refresher every September, is when we have that business meeting and we have our orientation and training, is to have all that out and let the board look at our matrix, look at those things, look at our time frames, and then we can get feedback on that. But from that standpoint, this board and the city commission completely, it didn't change a whole lot, but they just went in and completely opened up the hood and looked at they looked at schedules, they looked at staff authority, board authority, taking appeals to the city commission, that type of thing. I mean, we don't have that very often. It's happened before where this board has denied something, and then we've had the applicant appeal that denial to the city commission, and that just doesn't happen very often. And you can have a case where you would approve something and all the neighbors put together a petition and they protest that to the city commission, and that doesn't happen very often. But all of that is built into the system, and so we don't want to be a self-appointed design board. We have guidelines, we tell you what the guidelines say, and we report and you decide.
And I will say, for the benefit, I know there was some time here in the last few years, I think prior to your appointment, but that we did make some sort of change. I remember it was awnings or basic signings that you asked for permission to go ahead and have this. I don't remember that exactly, but that was kind of that minor little thing that, again, they said, we don't need to go.
The other thing that changed, and that was at the request of staff, because it was wearing us out doing it. But when the ordinance was first passed for having sidewalk furniture, having sandwich board signs on the sidewalk, having things out, every one of those requests had to go to this board. And we came to this board and said, do you trust us as a staff to review these and approve them, or do you want every one of them to come to you? And the board said, no, we think that's something that you can review and approve administratively. So we do that periodically, but when that ordinance that allowed for that was first passed, we were bringing a case where somebody wanted to put a sandwich board sign out in the sidewalk in front of their business, and it was going to look like this, and so we'd bring it to this board, and you'd show it to you, and you'd say, yep, we'll approve that. And that, as it was looked at, and we visited with the board about it, you said you didn't have any great interest in that, so we amended the ordinance and took that out. So now that's approved administratively. So, I mean, those would be some examples. All I can say is that painting is not one of them, because for every well-received painting proposal, there can be an equally one that everyone wishes they had a chance to say no to. So,
Appreciate the comments from our board. I just always looking for ways, always asking questions. There's always room for improvement. I didn't know the matrix existed, so
no, I mean, that's part of what we do every September as part of our orientation and training, is we'll get a refresher on that. We have a lot of new staff. They need a refresher on that, so it's good for everybody.
if there are, over the past year or two, of items that we approved, if there's something that could be added to that matrix, I would be curious to see, from your opinion, if a new category needs to be added.
Yeah, there could be new categories. One of the ones that's always tricky is awnings. And so it's like, well, we're going to replace our awning with the same type of awning. And then they put up an awning, and it looks absolutely nothing like the awning that was there before. And then neighboring business owners call us and say, that's awful. And can they do that without, did they get approval for that? It's like, well, no, they told us they were just changing it out like for like, and they didn't. And so those are just kind of the things that you kind of learn by doing. But I think if we start by looking at the matrix, and then people can decide whether those distinctions make sense or not.
Well, and the only thing that comes to mind for me that I think, and we discussed kind of at length when it happened, was the sidewalk license renewals.
Yes.
Not new applications, but renewals. I think that process
that
could be.
would take a code amendment, but I think that getting that feedback from you, that's the kind of thing we need to say, well, let's amend the code and make that administrative.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's a big one for staff and applicants and everyone.
The big time
Yeah.
consumer for us. It's, from my perspective, the only time we should bring one back to you is if it's been a problem and we got a whole bunch of complaints from the neighbors or
Right.
public, then we report that back to you. But otherwise, if it's just approving the same thing that's there, I can't see a reason why we need to, I won't say trouble you, but there isn't any reason to make it not be an administrative process.
Right. So.
And these comments aren't just about our board. It's about staff time too, and applicant time, because everybody's time is valuable. So trying to hit all three.
Yeah, and everything is in cycles. And for Mr. Nelson's benefit, since he's still here, I would point out that one of the great, and it was a change that was done at the state level, but we had, for a long time, the state of Kansas had what they called the Environs Law, and the Environs Law required that the Heritage Commission look at any project or proposal that was within 500 feet of a National Register property. And if you take the Salina Regional Health Center, there's like 4 rings that, of course, all overlap on the Salina Regional Health Center project. So every time they turned around, the property director for Salina Regional Health Center was at a Heritage Commission meeting because they wanted to build an addition here, or they wanted to do this or change that or do that. And so that went away, and we created what was called the Hospital Medical Zoning District, and then basically anything that I would just say that the number of trips that Salina Regional Health Center staff had to come to public board meetings is a 10th or a 20th of what it was a number of years ago. So it's all in a matter of perspective and what your perspective is. But you had the Masonic Temple and the Prescott House on Prescott, and almost anything that the hospital tried to do on their property, they were within 500 feet of a National Register property, and every time they turned around, they had to go in front of the Heritage Commission. That has all gone away. Special zoning districts that were customized for the health center were done away with, and now they have their own zoning category, which gives them a whole lot of flexibility to operate within too. So there are things just go in trends and cycles, and actually, while they had to come before this board for this, the number of trips and applications that Salina Regional Health Center has to file is a fraction of what it was 15 to 20 years ago.
Okay. Are there any other comments in other business? No? Okay. I'm going to move on to number 5, public forum. I'm assuming there's still no one online.
We do not have anyone from the public online to comment.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move we adjourn. Whoops. I'll move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,